Ladies and gentlemen, let's now go on with today's first panel. I'm looking forward to meeting the four people that will talk with me about the next panel. How does the new normal impact greening education? How can we set up vocational education or TVET for greening our economies? How do we achieve a more inclusive ecosystem? We will talk about this topic, and I'd like to introduce my four panelists. One is live here in Bern on site, Mr. Philipp Erni, Director at Center for Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability. Hello and welcome to
Nice
Future
to
Talk 2020, Mr. Erni. And three more specialists join us via Zoom call, and here they are. I say hi to Nasreen Mani, Executive Director of the Global Apprenticeship Network. Here she is. Hello, Nasreen. We check the microphone.
Afternoon, everyone.
There she is. Hello. Also, a warm welcome to Catherine Rowan, Vice President, Human Resources of Nestle.
Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here
Catherine.
with you.
Good to have you here. And Andreas Hart, Managing Director at Lucas Nülle GmbH. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here.
We can hear you, we can see you. I would say let's start with our panel. We have interesting things to discuss. And maybe we start with Nasreen Mani. One question I'd like to hand over to you. You're the Executive Director of Global Apprenticeship Network again, and a specialist in the field of skills development. You also have strong partnerships with the private sector. So could you tell us how can the private sector lead the way in developing strategies for greener vocational education programs, also particularly in light of the impact of COVID-19?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. It's a privilege to be able to share our work, and it's quite an honor to share the stage with Catherine Rowan, who is one of our key partners at Nestle. And I think that's the heart of the GAN's work, and the heart of the response to your question is about collaboration and partnership. It's critical that when we're talking about a future of work that includes greening economies, including greening the workforce, that the private sector is closely involved with the development of curricula, with the design of the education system. It's critical that we understand the issues of supply and demand, and that we're able to tailor the education system to the needs of the labor market, understanding the innovations and technologies. And I think it was very exciting. The previous speaker from Hilti highlighted some interesting things that are happening in his organization, but it's also essential that we take messages like that to our education system, to our labor market practitioners, for them to understand what developing these technical skills means, what these vocational skills will be. I think it's critically important that we are able to work together to address the issues of jobs and skills mismatch. We've picked up as the GAN that, one of the issues that constantly crops up, and it doesn't matter where we operate, and GAN operates in at least 16 countries around the world, developed and developing. But this issue of jobs and skills mismatch comes up time and time again. And what that means is the education system has curricula, has education frameworks in place, but they're not really aligned to the needs of the labor market, not really aligned to the developments taking place in business. So we're talking about more agile and flexible systems. We're talking about developing skills bases for people, that they can move through the system, they can move through economies, they can shift jobs as the technologies influence their day-to-day work. So I think it's really exciting to see that these conversations are happening, such as today, but equally important we've seen with the last 8 months or 10 months of COVID, is how rapidly education systems, governments, policymakers, and the private sector have come together to adapt, to put in place different learning systems, to put in place digital learning, offline learning, remote learning assistance mechanisms. And I think for me, one of the silver linings, if there is a silver lining out of COVID, is that policymakers have become really responsive very quickly. that we're engaging in far more social dialogue and we're talking to one another as equal partners. And I think we're looking at really shifting what has been very traditional education systems to respond to this future of work that has suddenly arrived far faster than we imagined. So thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Nazreen, for sharing these thoughts with us. Catherine Rowan, you're the Vice President of Human Resources at Nestle, and Nestle is the world's largest food and beverage company headquartered here in Switzerland, and you employ about 300,000 people around the globe. So could you tell us from your perspective, what skills will the next generation of management need to embrace the sustainability priorities of large companies like Nestle as you seek to ramp up your positive impact on society?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. It's an excellent question. And I would say I would slightly turn the question around to, instead of the skills for the next generation, it's really the skills of today's generation, because I think the future is now when it comes to sustainability, and the future, we really need to be acting today in order to make a difference for tomorrow. And in fact, as a company, we've made a number of statements, and we have very, very high ambition to make a difference in this world with respect to topics like our emissions, plastics, for instance. We have said that by 2025, we would have 100% of our packaging and reusable packaging or recyclable packaging, and that's literally tomorrow. And similarly, when it comes to our emissions, and our environmental impact, we have said that we'd like to have zero environmental impact in our operations, meaning our facilities and our factories. And even today, we already have some factories that have zero water usage impact, because we extract the water from dairy and not from the environment around us, and we're able to have limited impact. But to your question, I would say specifically, there are so many that are required in terms of skills for the future. And I would say three pop to mind most specifically. One is consumer centricity. And, it's always been important for, an industry such as ours, and for many industries, to be consumer centric. But I would say even more so today, it's really important that we're in touch with consumer needs, with consumer preferences, anticipating as well consumer preferences. And increasingly important to be able to do that and to understand the externalities and the external factors that are ongoing because of climate change. The second point is, or skill that I would say is important, is around communication and stakeholder management. And it seems obvious. I mean, those of us who deal with the external world and over the course of our career understand that, and people like Nazreen have to do that each and every day. But I have to say that it's even more important now that our managers are able to interact externally, not just focus on the day-to-day, but be able to really engage with NGOs, with government, with startups, with universities, etc. I'll give you an example of one of our markets in Ecuador. In the work that they've done, they reached out to young people with a project called Reto Planeta, in order to be able to help the country meet its plastic neutrality objective. And so reaching out to young people to get ideas from them to then incorporate into the business is critically important. So, it's not everybody who can make that happen, and having the skills to make it happen is really important. And the final thing that I think is critical as a skill is having more of a big picture mentality. So, for example, it's taking a holistic approach, and it's not necessarily looking at it from, as they teach you in business school, to, look at the bottom line and whether or not you're making a profit or a loss, but it's really having a holistic view as to how the products, the services that one offers are able to make a difference in society. And really that is going to help us make a difference in this world. So in order to be able to drive innovation and do it in a sustainable way. So those are my thoughts on that topic.
Thanks for sharing them with us, Catherine. I have more questions also that I'd like to hand over to you, but one more question to Mr. Philipp Erni. You're the Director Center for Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability at the University of Zurich. To what extent does the normative concept, Education for Sustainable Development, ESD, encourage students to challenge established arguments and marketing slogans by doing their own empirical research?
Yes, you mentioned Education for Sustainable Development, the concept developed by UNESCO. And when you look at a little bit at this definition or the explanations, it's meant to develop knowledge, skills, values, and worldviews to enable people to become more sustainable. But for me, there is something missing. What is, for example, the role of entrepreneurship and innovation for sustainable change? And there is, in fact, a UN Resolution 69/2010 passed in 2014 on entrepreneurship for sustainable development. There are the UN Sustainable Development Goals that see business more as part of the solution and not just part of the problem. And this is not really addressed. And as you mentioned, I'm the director of an associated institute, which is meant to be a bridge between academia and the private sector. And what I learn on a daily basis is that there's so much knowledge around in the private sector, so many innovative solutions. And this knowledge also needs to come to the university. We still have this belief that there is a one-way street. The university does research, creates knowledge, and then the private sector adopts it. No, there is a lot of knowledge created in the private sector that should also come back to the university. And I realized that it's not just a problem at university, that they're often detached from this reality, but even at high schools. I mean, we had research projects at high schools on sustainable development, education, and I realized it's mostly normative in the sense that students are told what are the global sustainability problems, who is the perpetrator or who is to blame for it, how can we regulate these evil actors, and often there is an implicit anti-business rhetoric in it. And they often show documentaries, and then you see clearly, okay, there is a bad business polluting the river here, and there's a good NGO that is protesting, and then eventually there's regulation, and the bad business actor is tamed, and so on. So it's all about regulation. It's about change as a potential risk rather than a potential opportunity. And governments also see mostly their role as regulators, not facilitators of change. If they would see their role as facilitators of change, they would ask the question, so what are the products and services that would create great value for sustainable change, but they're not developed in the private sector? So the government could say, okay, let's create incentives that the private sector starts to invest in such products or technologies. That can be through competitions, through advanced purchasing agreements, through faster regulatory approvals, and so on. And that would really then be really an engine of sustainable change. But to go back to the university or to high schools, there's often the question, what can you do to make the world more sustainable? And then it's all about lifestyles, or go and protest against the evil actors. But I think the UN Sustainable Development Goals are not about activism, they're about action. And it's not about personal lifestyles and feeling good about yourself, it's about scalable, sustainable solutions. So wherever you look, you need business, you need entrepreneurship and innovation for sustainable change. And that's the aspect that is missing, and that makes students often quite uncritical. They adopt the rhetoric, they hear everywhere, and it doesn't encourage them to really critically think, do we really have the right baseline assumptions here? And the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they represent a paradigm shift in thinking, but it hasn't really arrived in politics or at universities. That's a little bit my concern.
Okay, a lot to do in the future.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Erni. Andreas Hart, you are the director at Lukas Nülle, a global player for technical education in Germany. And my question is, how can TVET help make the transition to green technologies for the wider community?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for that important questions. We are not only actively working in Germany, but we do more in, let's say, more than 120 countries worldwide. And from that perspective, TVET So a transfer of a full set of, let's say, latest green technology from Germany, from European countries we are dealing with, to wider communications is an excellent educational purpose vehicle. We see this vehicle is going to strengthen local countries on their way to a much higher industrialization level. And for that reason, also avoiding the mistakes we did here in Europe, let's say of the older industrialized brothers. And for that specific purpose, technical competencies are the basic tool to make it happen for those countries. And let's come to a real best practice approach. As a starting point, together with Ministry of Education, Industry and Energy, in many of those countries, good ones or the developing ones already on industrial level, we do provide workforce qualification. For example, we start with a stable energy management of a local community, of a province, of a local state, via first microgrids, later at a larger scale with a more intelligent smart grid, and therefore an updated curriculum for all technical careers on professional institutes on university level, and a real investment in digital green training hubs will build a sound foundation for such a development. So our recommendation is always with a good funding in the background from World Bank, from KfW, from Germany, from African Development Bank, from Agence Française de Développement, for example, ADB or JICA, start with some pilot institutes and do a vocational rollout on country level or on province level during the first 2 years. This is a real hands-on approach where we would like to support, let's say, those countries. A good starter, and that's something we found out ourselves here in Germany as a company, is always solar power. Means provide the adequate infrastructure first with a zero CO2 footprint in various non-developed places. And for that reason, establish your own inclusive ecosystem. And we would be very happy to support people, governments, politicians to make that happen.
Great, they heard you. Maybe they contact you in the next days. Thank you for this insight, Mr. Hart. Catherine Rowan, one more question I'd like to hand over to you. So many changes going on at the moment, all around us. What do you think? Do you need more younger change makers on board at Nestle to help your company meet rapidly evolving societal expectations?
I would say absolutely. There's no question about it. And hands down, and we have certainly been committed to making sure that young people are part of the equation at Nestle. But I would say, first and foremost, we believe that a successful company, that we can only be successful if we have, if we are as diverse inside as our consumers are outside. And so our company really needs to reflect that diversity in the society that we serve. Age and stage, different mindsets, different attitudes. And of course, young people are a big part of the equation. I think we only have to look at our own children. I have 20-something children who teach me each and every day about new things and how to be a little bit more in tune with the environment and climate change. So I have to say, both outside the company and inside, we find that our young people are change makers. But what in this context, where climate change is such an important consideration, it really helps us to have people with a different mindset and a different sensibility around the topic. And we have for a long time, pretty much since about almost 7 years now, have been actively involved in engaging and supporting young people around the world. It started in Europe in 2013 with what we called our Nestle Needs Youth campaign and initiative, and we expanded that across the globe into 2017 and today. And it really is all about making sure that young people have the skills that they need to thrive today and tomorrow. Very much aligned to what Nazreen was saying in terms of making sure there's, she talked about jobs and skills mismatch. And it's one of the reasons why we've been so actively involved in the Global Apprenticeship Network, along with Nasreen and many of the organizations involved. The Nestle Needs Youth Initiative really has 3 different pillars. It's around employability and employment, around entrepreneurship, and also agripreneurship. And perhaps I'll just mention one topic and focus a little bit on what we're doing in one area around agripreneurship in Nigeria, and that is that we've just announced a recent agreement with the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, and it really is all about making sure that young farmers are able to have the skills necessary to improve their skills, their harvesting, their crops, in order to be able to have sustainable lives, sustainable communities, and of course for Nestle, it's sustainable product at the end of the day. And so it's a win-win, but it's making sure that our young people are skilled and that's aligned to our goals around sustainability, so that we can create strong communities going forward.
Thank you, Catherine. Philip Ernie, your center aims to explore the role of the private sector in sustainable development on the local and global level. So the question is, do we need more input from the world of practice in view of the fact that effective solutions to sustainability challenges are created outside the education system?
Yeah, that's what we really try to do. I mean, in my teaching courses on sustainability and society, I invite a lot of people from the practical world, a lot of successful companies that have developed sustainable solutions. And I'm very surprised all the time that students are curious, they're interested, they love this knowledge coming in from outside. They start also, they ask critical questions, but they also realize that often these businesses can be part of the solution. I remember I had one CEO from some medium-sized company in Switzerland called Monopol AG. They're producing paints, and they were wondering what's the link between a company making paints, painting the Apple building in Cupertino and sustainable development.
Okay.
And he was actually irritating the students quite a bit because he said, I mean, regulation is killing our business and so on. And they thought, oh, why is he inviting him? And then suddenly he talked about his business in India, where he created he invested there 40 millions in building up the market there, and he developed an innovation, namely it's called Coolest White. It's a paint where you put it outside on the wall of the house. The internal temperature decreases by 3 or 4%. So there's suddenly an entire city being built in India with this paint, which there's no need for air conditioning anymore and so on. And so suddenly they realized, oh, maybe he can also be part of the solution. And there was a critical question saying, well, you are just outsourcing this work from Switzerland to India because the jobs, the costs are lower, and you're exploiting people there, and just to make profits and so on. And then he said, first of all, I can keep the jobs here only because I invest there as well.
Okay.
And second of all, I invested there 40 million, and until I make a profit, it will take another 10 to 15 years. So a lot is at stake. But he explained to them, look, businesses are not creating value for society by merely preventing risks. They are creating value by deliberately taking risks to build up a new business. And that's, I think, a core message that also needs to arrive in our education system.
Thank you, Mr. Ernie. Nasreen Mani, one next question I'd like to hand over to you. And first, thanks for tuning in from South Africa today. How does GAN Global view the relationship between the future of work, work-based learning, and the green economy?
So I think we're seeing that there's an absolute intersection between all of these concepts. And when we spoke earlier, I know several speakers have spoken about the SDGs, and I think part of the silo mentality that we sometimes get trapped in is that we look at SDG 4 as education, SDG 8 as decent work, and we leave the skilling discussion there. In fact, the skills agenda cuts across all of the SDGs. We need educated and skilled people to drive the sustainable development revolution, and to build on what Mr. Ernie said, we need to move from talking to action and action to impact. And for the GAN, what we're seeing is that climate disruption, climate change, the need for greening the education system cuts across a number of areas within vocational education. And in fact, it's related to the need for labor forces to be skilled appropriately, to be able to respond and take up these green and sustainably orientated jobs that are emerging. But the climate issue also affects migration and demographic shifts, which has an absolutely direct impact on TVET systems, because TVET systems need to be able to respond to issues of supply, so the local skills supply, but they also need to be able to engage in skilling migrating populations. Now, I think the keynote speaker, the futurist speaker earlier, spoke about 300 million climate migrants coming into Europe. How do we ensure that those migrants are actively engaged in the economy? And we need to ensure that their skills are linked to what our systems need, whether you're in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, or in the Americas. Another interesting issue that's influencing the TVET systems and linked to the climate issue is the digital disruption. Because you know the digital technology, Industry 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution, whatever we call it, the issues of smart production, big data, you just have to ask Nestle how those are changing agro-processing and agricultural production, and then getting into Nestle factories or any other manufacturing environment. It's changing the nature of jobs, and it's directly impacting the skills demands in the labor market. And we need to ensure that our VET systems are appropriately matured very quickly, in fact, and it speaks to the need for management to review systems. It speaks to the need for policymakers to engage and set up these enabling frameworks. It needs a multi-stakeholder approach. And again, Mr. Ernie spoke about the role of the private sector, not just to be a passive recipient of this, but actually the private sector is driving a lot of this change. So why not bring the private sector into the discussions around vocational education system revamp and upgrading?
Thanks, Nazreen. Andreas, your company is based in Germany and you're helping and setting up technical education projects around the globe, almost everywhere. So from your point of view, what does the future of vocational education look like? Are we looking at a business as usual, or are there trends that can reach more people and make learning more efficient?
Yeah, this is a very let's say, interesting question when it comes to change. It is not business as usual anymore. Not at all. Due to the fact that today our planet is a very vulnerable ecosystem on one hand. Climate change, as said, is an ongoing process. And from the support we are offering to countries and World DIDAC as a member we are including, we think that there is no excuse for any further delay. COVID-19 is and will stay for a certain time and an ongoing game changer. And it, on the other hand, it brings additional momentum for distance learning. And vocational education today through internet, for example, online, makes it a lot easier to share content with much more people than just having people in an institute, in a school, in a university, due to the fact that interactive learning online and teaching is still feasible to a much larger amount of people. That's going to be helpful. Wherever you have an internet connection, and that's the bottleneck, people are ready to start, let's say, education. The last point in this development, the future of vocational education is therefore even more important than ever before. As technology is developing faster and faster, the need to onboard, as someone said before, all stakeholders, a multi-stakeholder approach, to onboard all stakeholders of such a learning process at a larger scale on time is absolutely mandatory. There's no way out. There's no excuse for any delay for that reason. Regular curriculum update in technical schools guarantees that no one is left behind in latest eco technologies. And for that reason, blended learning, theory via internet, online, and practical things in schools, hands-on training, developing hands-on competencies is still a very, very important method. And out of that, there is a need for culture to accept and to celebrate, let's say, lifelong learning of all stakeholders. Adults having already a job, going through a job description, qualification needs update. People like that needs update on a daily basis. For that reason, last but not least, distance learning and online tools will be critical to increase efficiency. And for that reason, we would like from World DADEC and from our company side, give further support wherever needed.
Thank you, Andreas. And to all our viewers that are watching us online, you can interact with us and with our panelists. So if you have a question, please post the question under the YouTube in the comment function, or you can send it via our app, our event app, and it will appear here on my tablet, so I can hand the question over to our panelists, to our experts. So we want interaction with you. Andreas, one more question I'd like to hand over. In your opinion, how can vocational education or apprenticeships have sustainable impact on communities, especially in developing countries?
This is something that can be a little bit difficult on one hand, because it depends on the people in those countries. Not only in developing countries, we are also looking at some sort of, let's say, missing expertise in political processes, in grant writing, in all, how to make an educational program as a living experience, let's say, to learners. And in order to create value add, let's say, to local vocational schools and institutes, even including companies making use of vocational apprenticeships, in most cases, people are looking for how to get started. And for that reason, the first very important agenda point is always implement an environmental ethic. What does that mean? A greening initiative, as well as an implementation of an environmental ethic, means get all members of the local community involved and make it as an application of ethic when you take decisions, economic decisions that affect the community, that you really are following the environmental ethic. That's very important. So we're talking about greening behavior. Greening behavior is going to be enhanced, let's say, through better understanding of latest technology out of industry from first countries, from Europe, from Germany, and also in Asia and other areas. And please give people the skills and the hands-on competencies to improve sustainability in their area. Start from scratch sometimes, but it's worth doing it. Having said that, yeah, it's not only a promise, we must walk our talk. Future talk is the headline of today's event. We must walk our future talk, or our talk of today. We must be aware of the lessons, because our actions and, let's say, behaviors in wherever you are and wherever the country is, wherever the community is going to be seen as a lesson to a community of learners with numerous stakeholders, political level, industry level, the normal private person, bring people together, roundtable discussions, roundtable measurements. And for that reason, I think greening organizational behavior, we call that, and attitudes are king. That was the first point. Let me just give you another important agenda point for implementing ecological literacy. What we have found out, every student and every teacher will develop a comprehensive understanding of the basic patterns and processes by which nature sustains life, and how these ecological concepts relate to, let's say, sustainable human communities. Greening curriculum, including lessons learned from Europe, from the US, from all the others, from China as well, very industrialized countries, and their try and error. Please include this in greening curriculum. And of course, put a high priority on professional development, because the trainers, the instructors, the people are in the educational sector are actually the multipliers of all. Train-the-trainer programs are very substantial and are valuable assets for that. And last but not least, implement the leading principle. We call it learning it by living it. What to do first? We have seen, and we as a company as well, as a vocational institute, will green its facilities and adopt and demonstrate environmental principles. For example, very pragmatic stuff such as the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. That's already a strong action. If everybody does this, we would have already a better world, let's say, on a larger scale. And then start implementing renewable energies for local power supply. Please invest in energy efficiency to reduce consumption of energy. And of course, look at your electricity bill every month. I mean, there's a very practical things. For that reason, consequently, look that you're going for resource conservation. Make your institute, your community, a direct showcase and real industrial application to a certain extent of the future professions you're dealing with, because this will allow on a social level for an experiential place as pedagogy teaching approach, and will also enhance, let's say, the environmental awareness of students and staff. They will see their vocational school utilizing green practices on a day-to-day basis. That's something very fundamental. You can feel it. You are within your passion, your heart. Younger people and older people, let's stay together, and the learning outcome will be very impressive. For that reason, greening facilities and operations are the right method.
Thank you, Andreas. Mr. Erni, the potential for public-private partnerships as a driving force for sustainable change is immense. Can you share with us some initiatives of CCRS which have successfully fostered collaborations working towards a green economy and ecosystem?
Well, we are not really the ones who are facilitating these things. We are mostly collecting good examples of how things can actually work. And before I was director of this institute, I worked for FAO in Rome, and it was a project on the sustainable provision of environmental services in agriculture in tropical countries. And I observed many interesting projects in Kenya where markets for environmental goods were created for local people. And what does that mean? For example, you have this classical concept of payments for environmental services. It's argued that's a nice business case. You have upstream farmers that adopt sustainable practices, so the water quality will improve downstream, so the industry downstream should pay these farmers for being providers of environmental services. But the problem here is that there's a third party, often WWF or CARE or another donor agency, they organize everything. They provide farmers with tree seedlings for agroforestry. They do the grass strips for soil erosion. They make sure that the industry downstream pays because they want to have the logo WWF or whatever. But it's not really a business case because the main problem in Kenya when it comes to sustainability is poverty. So these farmers, they're forced to sometimes adopt unsustainable practices because of poverty, because of lack of access to knowledge, lack of access to investment. And so when you look at the average farm size in this upstream region was 0.3 hectares. They have mostly 6 to 7 kids, and often they survive on such a tiny plot because one kid has obtained a job in the nearby city. But if the others don't get a job outside agriculture, if they have to stay on this small plot, they cannot provide their own food. I mean, it's too small for inheriting this tiny plot, so they have to migrate or cut wood to cultivate further land, and that's not even allowed in Kenya. So we often don't see the real problems there. And we often take markets away from the local people. For example, why cannot farmers grow these tree seedlings and make a business out of it? Why can you not encourage farmers to become entrepreneurs and specialize on services to do soil conservation measures for other farmers and then get a payment for it? So there are many possibilities to really make the local people part of the solution. And what my experience always was the best solutions come from the local people. They don't come from us.
Really?
And it's so tough for us to accept this. But I think it's time to take the local people who know the local context better, who know the local needs better, to take them more seriously and invest in these people so they can also become part of the solution. They're not just part of the problem. also an issue.
Thank you, Mr. Ernie. Mrs. Manny, what are some of the mechanisms that GAN Global regards as critical to promote sustainable and inclusive solutions in this place in order to move beyond policy and into implementation? Oh, we can't hear you. One click.
We said
there
that's
you
the,
are.
that's
Thank
the
you.
phrase for 2020. You're on mute.
That's true.
So that's really key for the work of GAN Global and our partners. It's about shifting the discussion, and some of the strategies revolve around the policy angle, but it's really important to get this enabling framework right. But then also building on peer-to-peer learning, so getting our members to share with one another, getting our partners to learn and build on good practice. Also building on CEO and private sector leadership. I think, one of our speakers at the beginning, I think it might have been Mr. Ernie, spoke about using the private sector and leveraging from the lessons that the private sector has in place, and taking that best practice and shifting strategies. But also CEO leadership is key. We know that our CEOs engage with one another, but they also engage with government leaders, they engage with policymakers. So it's really important to get that work going. And then the third angle is getting our hands dirty. So going into countries, learning from the different contexts within which we work, adapting program delivery to the needs of the different country contexts. And here, what's also important, I think, is strategies around very focused professional development. So building a pool of competent trainers and lecturers within the VET system, ensuring that we create these enabling learning environments. We have the adequate funding in place. So along with this policy landscape, the legislative framework, you also need the funding to support such work. Ensuring that your standards and your curriculum design are in place and are relevant and responsive. I've worked in countries where the need to change curriculum quickly can't happen simply because the process is so bureaucratic. So how do we change those attitudes? And then again, ensuring this social dialogue. So I spoke about the need for multi-stakeholder partnerships. Within that, ensuring that all of the stakeholders have clear roles and responsibilities, but ensuring also that the social dialogue is inclusive. So it cuts across all of the users of the system, as well as those who are responsible for designing the system. The other issue is having sound labor market data. We need statistics. We need to understand what is happening in the system. We need to see the data to enable us to project and to be able to plan ahead, because that's what's important in VET systems, in skills development systems. And then also this robust regulatory framework that creates this enabling environment. And I think, if all of these elements can come together, we can build a framework of quality work-based learning, quality vocational education. You have the elements of entrepreneurship and business management built into that. And we really then can speak about an adaptable and responsive workforce that has been given the tools to be able to meaningfully engage with the labor market, with the green economy, and can contribute to sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazreen, and also thank you to our viewers. I just received some good questions here through our event app. That's why I have my mobile here. Don't wonder, I'm not chatting. I got questions here. I'd like to hand over them. After one question, I'd like to hand over to Mrs. Rowan, to Catherine. One more question about the coronavirus situation. Has this situation resulted in a renewed focus on reducing your company's environmental impact?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I think it's reminded all of us of the intrinsic link between our own health and the health of the planet. There's no question, there's no doubt about that. And if anything, the pandemic has accelerated the work that was already underway within our organization. We are already seized by the need to make change. But I'll give you a couple of examples. For instance, if we think about, our food offering, we've now sort of moved more towards plant-based foods and alternatives because our consumers are looking for that. So, Sweet Earth or Nature's Heart products in the United States, or here Garden Gourmet Burger. Many of you have probably already tasted it here in Europe. There's great examples of how we've tried to transform our product line in order to be able to meet consumer needs and also then have a reduced impact on the environment. We've also just recently, and this is literally hot off the press, we've just joined the Cool Food Pledge. And that's along with restaurateurs, other companies. It's workplaces and cities. It's a growing movement to reduce the impact of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. But it's all about the meals served on our premises. So we estimate with our 300,000 employees, we probably serve about every single year 50 million meals. That's a lot of meals, and so this is all part of ensuring that we do this in the most sustainable way. So we've committed to make that happen across our entire network. And then the final one, and it's my personal favorite, is our pledge to plant 3 million trees. And it was announced in March, so right at the very beginning of the pandemic. And those will be planted, and already some have been planted in Brazil and in Mexico as early as last spring. And so really taking a look at reducing the impact and making sure we have a much cleaner environment moving forward. So it's really exciting stuff. And I could keep going on, but in the interest of time, I won't. But yes, indeed, it certainly accelerated the work that we've been doing on the environment.
Great, thanks for this very important action of Nestle. I'd like to hand over the one question I just received through our app. How should the government and educational institutions entice the private sector to participate or invest in the upskilling of the potential labor force? I hand the question over to all of you. Who wants to share his thoughts concerning this question? Mr. Ernie, for example, yeah?
One example that comes to my mind is the revolution of M-Pesa in Kenya, the mobile phone payments revolution that happened already 15 years ago. How was it possible to create this entire new market? How was it possible to use mobile phones as a tool of empowerment that benefits so many people, millions of people? And the start was with sort of innovative thinkers of development. They wanted to find out, can this be used for poor people, for financial transactions? But they didn't get any investment. And then they were eventually able to convince DFID, the UK Department for International Development, to start a pilot project. Because companies don't invest if the risk is too big. So that's where governments can chip in and say, okay, we reduce the risk by testing. Is there actually a market or is there no market? So they conducted this pilot project, and some outcomes were unexpected, but then they realized, oh, maybe the market is here, not here. And then suddenly Vodafone came, big companies started to invest in creating the whole infrastructure. And now it has become an industry on its own with its own skills that have to be developed, and it made many parts of the Kenyan economy more sustainable. And they have now their own Silicon Savannah. It has become a key industry in Kenya that is evolving rapidly. And so that's a good example where the private sector can actually come in, where the public sector considers it to be too risky, and then help to reduce the risk and then trigger the investments that make everything scalable. But it's too much, you expect too much from the private sector if you think they will come up with disruptive technologies just on their own. I mean, it's simply too uncertain. So that's where you need a government as well.
Thank you. Mr. Hart, do you also want to add something? Your point of view, what should the government and educational institutions do?
Yeah, it's some of the common challenges we are facing, actually, how to get local industry involved. When you look at a certain area, certain province where you have already existing investors, they do produce They want to produce more, so even foreign investors would like to come into that area. The big bottleneck is always, how can we get qualified workforce there? Otherwise, I do not invest. For that reason, we do support local chamber of commerces here from Germany, looking for investors from Germany. In African countries and things like that is always the same problem. The good thing is no one from industry refused to give answers to questions we were asking to them together with educational organizations and institutes and the government, the local government. We brought people together, roundtable discussions, and the demand for today's investors and future new investors was actually fixed, well defined. So everybody had to understand what the deliverables for workforce qualification was. This is just on paper. When it comes to reality, you need good funds from the governmental side, let's say 60%, 70% of an investment in trainers and instructors, in center of excellences for specific technical careers you need for the local investors and the new ones. And then the other 30 or 40% coming out of the existing companies and the future investors, bringing in as some sort of contribution to that new combined efforts, let's say some sort of a value add to create a more valuable industrial environment. That's not easy, because in many cases, industry expects always that government and educational institutes are actually feeding their demands, let's say, with the appropriate qualification. But this is not going to happen automatically. You always have to bring right people together. This is a part World Data can help. We as a company with expertise, we can help. What we also have seen, there's a lot of consultants out there. They even know how to improve that situation and are closely linked to all those stakeholders in such a process. And we have to cooperate more through partnerships, multiple stakeholder partnerships. I heard that some minutes ago. This is actually key to develop those things further.
Thank you. Nesrine, is there something you wanted to add? We see your hand.
If there's time.
Yes, sure, please. We have 10 minutes to go. Thank you, Nesrine.
Perfect. Thank you. I think, the UK apprenticeship model is a really interesting case of how business and government can work together. And, the UK has a skills levy system on companies with a payroll of £3 million and above. And what companies have done is really meaningfully engage with that system. So it's not just young people now doing apprenticeships. In fact, the biggest cohort of apprentices in the UK at the moment are those people who have been employed for many years. So you're looking in the age group 26 plus. So it's people looking to build existing skills. It's people looking to develop new skills. And that's funded through the government in partnership with employers who contribute to the levy. But also what's interesting is for companies with employees of less than 50 people, the British government will actually fund you to take on apprentices. And I think that's an interesting model, because it's trying to drive skilling at that SME level, which is often missing. So I think there's some really good practice out there that we can build on. I think there is a criticism in many countries that the private sector simply wants incentives, but I think incentives don't hurt. It's a way to engage with business. Governments who have really directed and focused skilling policies can make funding available, which is a key. But I think what's also important to get this partnership going is to ensure that business is part of the curriculum development and design process. They're part of the program development process, so that they feel engaged and that they can see the outcome of the system and that it meets the needs of their companies. So some examples that could be taken forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Nesrine. Catherine, for sure.
And maybe just to add and complement, and not to repeat what everybody else has said, which I'm fully aligned with. I would say that one of the things we underestimate for a company sitting here in Switzerland and Andreas, you in Germany, You know, we underestimate just how powerful the apprenticeship program and the policy framework has been here in Switzerland and in Germany. And what we have tried to do is to export the knowledge and the learning from you know, from this part of the world to other parts of the world, because I think if we can, I think what's lacking in a sense is the policy framework around which apprenticeships can flourish in other jurisdictions. And in some places they're really starting from scratch and there is nothing. And so I think we could do the world a service by talking a little bit more loudly about what's being done in this part of the world, and exporting some of the success stories in order to be able to create better frameworks elsewhere.
Thanks, Catherine. We received one question for you, Catherine, through our Whova app. Can you give us an example how you train or educate greening skills, or let's say greening attitudes, within your workforce around the globe?
It's a great question, and it's done in multiple ways. So it depends where you're sitting. If you have an office job like I do, it's probably through an e-learning program where, you know, I sit here in front of my computer as I am doing now, and I can learn a lot about our environmental practices and then what role I can play. But what probably the most important is on the job, and it really is on the job training around trying to make sure that I talked about a little bit about the work that we're doing at our factory level to make sure that we have zero emissions, zero waste coming from our facilities. And it really is helping our people learn in the moment how they can play a role in the in ensuring that we have reduced emissions, for example. But it's also creating. It's also about creating a culture of innovation. And so we've been really focusing in the last few years on getting grassroots ideas from all parts of the organization in terms of how to meet the challenge of greening. How do we ensure that we can better meet consumer needs? How can we be a better company? And so we've done that through competitions. We've done that through innovation funds. So all of that is part of, I would say, for the most part, on the job learning, on the job training, and that has been the most powerful way in which we've been able to accomplish our objective.
Thanks, Catherine. So we're coming to the end of our panel talk. I'd like to hand over a question to all of you, and I know it's a hard question. What is your wish for green education, if you had one wish? Maybe we start with Andreas. Yes.
More speed, more dynamics.
Nazreen.
Political will to change. And to ensure that change is rapid, responsive, and relevant. Yeah. Thank you.
Catherine, what would be your wish for the green education in the future?
100% engagement by everybody.
Philip, the last words for your wish.
Maybe more responsive educational institutions picking up the knowledge, the solutions that have been created in the private sector and illustrating how we can actually solve major sustainability challenges through collaboration. So it's not about individuals and how they carry their lives. It's about how can we combine the people with different competencies together to find solutions that work.
Together is the most important word nowadays. So thank you very much for this great panel talk. Thanks for diving with us into the world of green education, for sharing your thoughts with us. All the best to you. Thanks to our panelists and also to our audience for the great questions that came in. It's time for a short break, a short coffee break of around about 30 minutes. Maybe you want to check our website for more information about our speakers. Maybe you want to have a look on our agenda, what's happening this afternoon, what's happening tomorrow when we talk about artificial intelligence. And if you want to share your thoughts, your statements, your questions on social media, please use the hashtag FutureTalk2020. We're back in 30 minutes. Stay tuned. See you soon. Yeah, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Excellencies, welcome back to the second half of today's Future Talk. We all had a short coffee break, cappuccino, espresso. I hope you did the same and that you have power for the next panel discussion. Panel discussion number 2. I'm looking forward to introduce our 3 panelists. The topic of our panel talk is this: how does digitalization help to ramp up greening education? How can we develop an institutional TVET greening plan to generate jobs, to have the right skills for employability, for purpose economies, and for new business models? We will discuss this with 3 experts, with our 3 panelists that are joining us via video call, and here they are. I say a warm welcome to Stefan Hovig, Chief of Staff and Communications Officer at the Adecco Group.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Hello, Stephen. Good to have you here. Hi.
Thank you.
I also want to welcome Olga Stritska-Ilina, Senior Skills and Employability Specialist and Team Leader of the International Labour Organization, ILO. Hello.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Olga, good to have you here in this panel. Thanks for joining us. And last but not least, Mrs. Gabriela Uriarte, lead of LAP project and leading women area at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, WSBD. Hello, Gabriela.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to join this panel.
We're happy to have you here. And for all our viewers, all our guests, please use the Whova app for posting your questions into the app. They will appear here on my mobile phone, and I will hand the questions over to our panelists. So please be interactive, send your comments, send your questions. I will hand them over during or after our panel talk. So let's start with question number 1. I'd like to hand over the first question to Stefan Hovig. Stefan, Adecco is the world's leading provider for personal services with about 35,000 employees in about 60 countries. So some key facts. With this background, what do you think? What can be done to ensure digitalization optimizes the greening plan for employability? What is very important?
Very important question. Thank you so much. I think the most important precondition for success will involve efforts and flexibility from not only the individuals, but also from companies like ours and all the other companies around the globe in the sector, and the governments as well as training institutions. In this respect, I would like to highlight an initiative by the European Commission, who has early on realized that by 2030, 375 million people will need to be retrained and reskilled. And in this respect, they are championing the Pact of Skills that aims to mobilize and encourage all relevant stakeholders to take concrete actions for upskilling, reskilling of people of age, of people who have to switch from fuel engines, we have heard that before, into electric vehicles. And in addition to that, they have early on also realized that vocational and educational training is absolutely key to success. I'm very honored to be, since 4 years, a pan-European ambassador for the vocational educational training. And we all know that with a VET, you have a high chance to enter the workforce almost immediately when you have graduated. And with this, I think that companies, if I take the Adecco Group and Modis, our global technology brand, need to take initiatives like our Modis Academy, where we train young engineers, people in coding, in the smart industry, and all of that supports then our purpose to make the future work for everyone. Back to you.
Thanks, Stefan. Olga, you are Senior Skills and Employability Specialist at the International Labour Organization, ILO. Can you tell us how will transition to the green economy and climate action impact jobs, and skills? And what is the role of digitalization and technological change in this process?
Thank you for the question, and also thank you for inviting the ILO to this magnificent event. I think it's a super important question we are discussing today, because the world has been concentrating on the disruptive nature of technological change and not really spending enough time and paying enough attention to the question of the green transition. So in the ILO, we implemented in 2019 research, which produced an estimate, a global estimate of the job impact in 2 scenarios. I think this was actually mentioned in the keynote speech, this study. The 2 scenarios, one is a transition to the renewable energy economy, and another one is a transition to the circular economy, also already explained earlier by previous speakers. So cumulatively, and it's a good reason that we can treat this data cumulatively, because they are not, these 2 scenarios are not mutually exclusive. They are actually complementary. Cumulatively, these policies implementation may create globally over 100 million jobs. This is huge, especially in the context of the current crisis, health crisis, and the followed economic crisis and job crisis. This is something what the world will need very much. But in the short term, there might be also some negative effects on jobs. So around 50 million jobs may be negatively affected. Some of them are destroyed, but most of them actually will find similar occupations in the growing industries. These people will be able to relocate within the same occupation in the same country. They will need just a little bit of retraining. It's light, but they will need this retraining. And at the same time, there will be enough new jobs created that will require initial preparation through vocational education and training. And this will also require retrain those people who lose their jobs without the creation of similar jobs in growing sectors. And that training will require major retraining, potentially a requalification and a new qualification. That is a major investment. This is one point I would like to make. It will require a major investment through lifelong learning. And this will require also collaboration by the private sector, government, and individuals investing into training, retraining, reskilling, and upskilling opportunities. There will be enough jobs created, not only among environmental scientists, not only higher education, but also those people who are trained vocationally, such as assemblers, such as manufacturing workers, sales workers, construction workers, plumbers. They all will need to have an opportunity to retrain. And also we know that these jobs will be mostly affecting middle skill level and lower skill level. And it also happens that mostly these occupations are occupied by male. So we actually need also to provide retraining for women, for lower skilled people, so that everybody can reap the benefits of the transition. Now, coming to your second part of the question about digitalization, how does digitalization come into the whole picture? Mm. And I think, when we say digitalization, of course, it's a bit of a generalization, because digitalization doesn't happen to the same degree in the same sector, in different sectors and in different countries. The situation is quite different in agricultural sector of the Netherlands, for example, which is very high tech, compared to the agricultural sector in African countries, low-income African countries. So this has to be taken into account. But nevertheless, digitalization, technological change does penetrate everywhere and in all countries and in all sectors to different extent, but it does. And it may have a positive effect on greening if it's investment towards the green activities, green jobs. But if it's an investment towards digitalization of, for example, fossil fuel-based energy generation, it will be counterproductive. So it's all really about what our choices, our policy choices are. And also we need to take into account that digitalization is also another disruptor in addition to the disruptive nature also of the green transition itself, which I already mentioned. So they actually come together, and we need to make sure that people are prepared. So my argument is that we need to invest, but we also need to invest into training to prepare people to that jobs which we know will appear, and we have to know, we have to anticipate, we have to have the labor market information. So this we have to do just in time so that people get the jobs and they get the opportunities in the green economy. But also we need to retrain people just in case for those jobs where we don't know, because we have to recognize the disruptive nature of the changes. And for this, we need to supply them with soft skills, with transferable skills, with skills that provide some level of resilience to the change as well. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. I also saw Stefan nodding, agreeing to what Olga said. We want an interactive talk, so if you want to add something, please feel free to do so, yeah?
I mean, we have, together with the ILO, worked on the Future of Work report and stated there the need of a social contract, of a new social contract. And I think in that, let's say, governments, companies, individuals, we need to establish a lifelong learning account for everyone, which is nurtured by all parties, really in order to what Olga is saying, to make sure that those shifts we have heard yesterday, today, that those shifts are not leaving people behind, but really that we build bridges so that everyone can participate in the exciting future. Because I believe there are more jobs in the future than we'll have today. But we have to make sure we take everyone with us. Absolutely.
Leave no one behind in that case. Yes. Thank you, Stefan. Gabriela, hola. Thanks for tuning in from España. Gabriela, you represent today the World Council for Sustainable Development, which embraces about 200 leading global companies working together to accelerate the transition to a sustainable world. And of course, diversity and gender equity is a top agenda item for your organization. So from your perspective, what is the role of women in the very important case, sustainability?
Well, probably and hopefully everyone knows so far that when there are more women at top-level positions within the companies, these are more productive, more innovative, and more competitive. And it's not me who says so. There are many, many serious studies that reach to this conclusion. But moreover, companies that have more women at these decision-making positions tend to be more sustainable. Then the United Nations state that women play a crucial role on the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I really support this. Now, women, we play a key role for sustainable development, not only at the economical level, but also at the environmental and social level, right? And what is this sustainable development? Now, it's not just like facing climate issues. From my point of view, and I'm putting it in simple words, sustainable development is about progressing, but without destroying. It's about progressing, of course, at the economical level, but also at the environmental and social level. And then if we go back to the women issue, right? Women we develop special skills that help to achieve the sustainable development within business, no? And these skills, according to the Better Leadership, Better World report of Women Rights in 2030, these skills are social inclusion, environmental issues, and innovation, of course, as well, collaboration and global vision, transparency, recruiting and retaining talent, and so on. So it's good news. It's good news to know that the business world is waking up to include these skills into their executive levels. And I'm talking about including skills, not including women, which it's linked.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and it's a matter of, it's not just because a matter of justice or balance or of being fair, which of course it is, but it's because a matter of competitiveness. Back to you.
Thank you, Gabriela. Stefan, besides your executive role at Adecco, you're also ambassador for young people at the European Union. So could you tell us, why would you encourage someone, maybe at school or looking for a change of career direction that happens often at the moment, to acquire digital skills if they want to make a contribution to a cleaner and less resource-intensive world?
If I look back to my career, I have probably done 18 different jobs. So I have switched my profiles and my career quite some shifts and numerous times, always with the pleasure and with the, let's say, with the privilege to also search for my interests and to fulfill my interests. What I'm deeply convinced is that working for a greater good is something that most people dream of. It's a privilege, but I think it's something that companies need to really understand. And then if I look at the green economy and link that to vocational and educational training, green economy for me is not just electric cars, solar panel, renewable energy. Green economy starts with the traditional economy. I think it's a combination between what digital and digitization allows us today and the existing economy. Being in Bern today with the panel, it's the headquarters of the Swiss Railway. And if I look to the Swiss Railway, they have saved an enormous amount of energy by putting digital control systems into their trains. So it's a good example where you see that today you take traditional, like 100-year and more traditional industry, and you add digital to massively save energy. Why do I take that case? That case demonstrates, if you would do an apprenticeship at the Swiss Railway, you would see that today in each apprentice, digital is a key component. I was trained as a mechanic. Today, the same profile is a polymechanic with a lot of digital elements in it. So the influence of digital into vocational training and vice versa is phenomenal. And for me, it is actually the digital education that needs to be not a luxury, but it has to be an essential tool in everybody's education. Olga mentioned before, on an assembly line, wherever you are, I think that's really important. And that's also what we see as a company, that we have acquired General Assembly, a company where we help people to do coding in different areas. You can do that remote. You don't have to go on campus. And I think that's the access to the future for everyone, everywhere. Back to you.
Thank you, Stefan. Olga, I have one more question that I'd like to hand over to you. What are the biggest skills challenges and needs to ensure the smooth transition that we all will feel and see in the next years, months?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think smooth is the key question, is the key word there, smooth, because of course now we will transit this way or the other, but it's in the interest of the society to make the transition as smooth and as just as possible. So the human-centered agenda, which was mentioned by Stefan, and which is also the underlying principle of the ILO Centenary Declaration, is key. And actually in the ILO also we have this approach which we call just transition, which now became very embedded also in climate talks. So this is one of key themes there. Just transition is a comprehensive approach, which also includes not only skills development, but also other policy areas such as social protection, active labor market policies, and enterprise development, and so on. This is the approach, so that nobody is left behind and everybody gets a chance. And having said that, the key problem is coherence and coordination of policies and of activities as well. You know, if we look at countries, last year when we produced the research, we looked in depth in the experiences of 32 countries and compared that with the progress during last 10 years. And in fact, you can see it's an array of very, very encouraging skills development approaches. And still, we face the same challenge. There are skill shortages, there are skill gaps that prevent companies and also governments to implement the policies, the policy of environmental change, climate action. So this is really coordination, and then also already mentioned by speakers from the previous panel, social dialogue. This is not just, it's not just a lip service about the importance of involvement of the private sector, but without building on social dialogue, we cannot really translate the knowledge, the information about labor market developments, given the pace of change and the disruptive nature into the world of education and training. This is the key. And now, which skills? Of course, again, we can go into details, and it will take quite a lot of time. But I think if to answer that question in short, it's a combination of foundational skills. So it's literacy, numeracy, digital skills, and as well as basic environmental awareness and knowledge. I would count them as foundational skills that allow people to learn in the future, to build on that during their lifelong learning. It's a combination of soft skills, especially those ones that actually allow people to adapt, to be more resilient to change, to climate change, as well as disruptive changes such as the one we're living through now. To allow people to be more creative, to implement systemic changes, design thinking, analytical thinking, communication and networking, as well as leadership skills, because without capable leadership, without capable management and business thinking, entrepreneurship, we will not achieve the green change in the future, as well as consumer service, consumer advice, marketing. In fact, I can give you an example. A plumber who comes to a household becomes an advocate of the green change, because if he is aware about different green solutions to renewable energy, water heating system, for example, or water saving technologies as well, he becomes an advocate of the green transition for this household. So it's very important to green these kind of professions and their knowledge, as well as hard skills. So this is the last component. It's much easier to reskill a good construction worker or a good engineer into occupation in one of growing industries than the one that misses basic, has gaps in the core of the occupation. So it's the relevance of training to the labor market, which is really important. And also from the point of view of skills development, vocational education and training, we need to incorporate more of transferable skills, not necessarily soft, it's clear, soft skills are transferable, but also semi-hard skills, such as the budgeting, scheduling, recycling, energy, water saving. These are all transferable semi-technical skills that need to be incorporated into the curriculum development and competency standards. Over to you.
Thanks, Olga. Gabriela, your organization set up LEAP or LEAP. Can you tell us what LEAP stands for and what the objectives are?
Yeah, well, as you very well said before, WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, it's a global private organization of more than 200 leading companies. They are the biggest companies of the world. We were formally created 25 years ago, and we look for a more than a necessary purpose, which is to make business more sustainable while remaining competitive, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like having a positive impact on the shareholders, but also for the planet and for the society. And as I said before, this sustainability issue is about progressing without destroying at both economical, but also environmental and social levels. No? So if we go to the social level, social sphere, this implies, and you said before as well, the gender equality, no? Equal opportunities between men and women. And that is exactly what tackles SDG number 5. As I said before, or linked with what I said before as well, gender equality adds value to business, right? Despite this, and despite common sense, data are not very encouraging. Well, they're quite depressing, no? Only 5% of companies are led by women. Only 20% is the share of women at boards. Only 25% is the share of women at the executive committees, and so on and so on. So at WBCSD, we've decided to take action, and we launch this program addressed to company, but focused on women and sustainability. It's called LEAP. LEAP meaning jump ahead. LEAP meaning jump ahead not only for women, but also for business, no? And we combine these two elements that I consider to be unbreakable, women and sustainability. And what we try to achieve with LEAP is to make business more sustainable, but through women. We have two different goals. We help women to promote within their business, but also we train them on sustainability. So we make sure that once they reach those top level positions, the sustainability is embedded in their leadership and in their company strategy. This project is a one-year project with 3 different face-to-face models. Face-to-face, a part of this coronavirus situation, but there is one face-to-face week at Yale University, which is 100% training on sustainability. We also visit United Nations, so they share there the Sustainable Development Goals. Then there is a second model, a second face-to-face week at ESADE Business School in Madrid, where we train them on a general management program. It's an intensive mini MBA, let's say. And then the third model, it's during our council member meeting, where we gather every year the presidents and CEOs of our companies in order to share the best practices on sustainability issues. So we invite the participants to join us there. The companies that like to participate at LEAP, they need to propose a woman manager, let's say, or directive in a position already of responsibility, but also a mentor. And these mentors should come from the highest levels of executives of the company. I'm talking about the president, the CEO, general managers. And these people are going to, they could be even men or women. These people are going to mentor a woman participant from a different company. So what we would like to tackle with this cross mentorship process is both to help the women participants to develop their professional plans, but also we would like to raise awareness in the companies through these mentors on gender equality issues. Because what I always say is that what I don't share with my president, Peter Backer, regarding the obstacles I may found in order to be promoted at WBCSD, I do share them with the president of Adecco, for instance, not because she or he's not my boss. And he's going to think, oh, what happens to Gabriela at WBCSD? Gabriela, who's very smart, and she cannot break this glass ceiling. It might be happening at Adecco, no? And then she goes, or he goes back to the HR or training departments in order to, or diversity departments in order to help with and support different initiatives, no? So what we try to do is to raise awareness in the companies, no? With this program, and we try to transform the business world. We try to transform the companies in order to make them become a little bit better.
What a great idea, what a great plan that will work out for sure. Thanks for sharing these ideas, these plans, these projects, LEAP, with us and also with our viewers. And to our viewers, thank you. I received good questions. I will hand them over to you as soon as possible, but I have some more questions here on my tablet that we prepared, and the next one is to you, Stefan. What effect do you think will the pandemic have on the greening of education and the application of digital technology?
I will answer the question in a second. I just want to emphasize the point Gabriela made to make it a bit interactive. I truly believe that it's not only the sustainability that makes company in the future successful and differentiates them in the market. It is also the reason why young people join companies. And if we see the talent shortage, it has to be expressed. Now, regarding women, I strongly believe, so does our CEO, it has to start with hard targets. Companies do not usually change just out of intrinsic motivation. So we have, or he has set a clear target that by 2030 we have 50-50. On the way, I think programs like Gabriela has highlighted are absolutely crucial. We have programs, our chief HR has set up programs where we as executives fast track young female leaders. We identify, we mentor them. Each and every executive has 3 to 5 female leaders. And it's a positive discrimination. I have an executive search out at the moment where I clearly say, it's a female-only search. And I think those instruments are absolutely key. And then on top, if companies can also mentor cross and inspire each other, I think that's even better. So now coming to your question.
Thank you for
on the
doing
pandemic, very, very quickly, I think the pandemic has amplified many aspects. We're still facing the pandemic and have learned a lot, but also it has had severe impact on society and on business, and we will see more to come, unfortunately. So the desire, I think, to build a better and more sustainable world in that environment we're in has been amplified next to fast forward at least 10 years on the digital side. The importance to reskill and upskill to lifelong learning has also been one element that has been amplified through digital. We know today what is possible, like we do conferences. We have reduced our global travel, and I have been traveling roughly 3 to 4 days a week. Now by pandemic to almost 0. And we will keep that, not the 0, but we will really set targets to reduce the travel and with that also contribute to a better environment and to a better world. And with that, and what I said before on vocational and educational training, and Olga nicely laid out the different skills that we need to apply, new skills that we need to learn, soft, hard skills, transversional skills, I think are instrumental to make the future work for everyone. And that's the purpose we share and should nurture each and every one of us. Back to you.
You're so right, Stefan. Thank you very much. Olga, what do you think? What are the key policy pillars in skills development and lifelong learning for just transition?
Yes, thank you. I would like actually to build a little bit on what Stefan was talking about now in the context of the COVID-19. We have just implemented another survey, another piece of research together with UNESCO and the World Bank on the effects of the COVID-19 on the training provision in vocational education and training, both initial as well as adult learning. And we know that the disruption has been major, really. We know that training centers closures affected partial or full closures affected 99% of providers, of training providers. Imagine that, 99%. Full closures, 95%. This is enormous. This is absolutely enormous. And we saw that there was so much initiative on the side of training providers to still try to switch to distance learning, high-tech or low-tech. Distance learning doesn't have to be online. But at the same time, there have been so many problems. So I think we've been asking ourselves, has vocational education and training passed the COVID-19 test? And the answer is It did, but not without problems, really. And this is because there is no enough capacity on the side of teachers. There is not enough capacity on the side of learners. There are no enough platforms, well-working platforms, learning platforms, and resource materials. And most of all, in developing countries, we also have to face it. There is a major problem with access to infrastructure. With the level of connectivity. So this has to be really recognized because the situation is not the same around the world. So if these underlying difficulties are not resolved, then digitalization will not work for the social cohesion and equity. It will be actually counterproductive. That's why we need to think about high-tech solution, digitalization, as well as low-tech solution, and also think about the connectivity issue and infrastructure. Now, about your question about the pillars, I already said something about policy coherence. For me, it's really the key, so that different ministries as well as different policies talk to each other. So let's take, for example, nationally determined contributions. So these are the programs every country produces, showing the commitment of the country to meet the objectives of the Paris 2015 climate change agreement. We looked into that. We know that less than half of those plans have some provisions in skills development. This is not satisfactory enough. So this is something to think about. And also for this, we need well-functioning institutional platforms at national level. And then we very much support sectoral level, because at sectoral level, you can actually create platforms where private sector and education training providers talk to each other in a meaningful way, and also at the level of granularity, allowing to look into the skill needs at the competency level, which is super important for the training provision, adjustment of the training provision. So this is the basics of the social dialogue. We support very much sectoral approaches around the world, and the ILO is very heavily engaged in supporting countries in that. And then capacity development. It's not only institution building, but also capacities of those people, those stakeholders which are involved, to be aware of what are the green mechanisms. So what does it mean with greening products, greening services in different sectors? What will it imply in terms of job tasks and therefore also skills? How will it then affect occupations and jobs? And also therefore, how can we mainstream those green skills into the curricula, into competency standards, into qualification systems, and so on. Then many people mentioned that a lot of policy initiative happens, but implementation is a problem. And this is what we know from our research in 2011 and the same finding in 2019. It's very, very disappointing. A lot of initiative, but when it comes to implementation, it's not satisfactory at all. So for this, we need very efficient evaluation and monitoring mechanisms, and also budgetary mechanisms, so that there is accountability, the shared tasks and divisions between different stakeholders, and everybody is accountable for the implementation. We can also monitor the system and understand what works well, what doesn't work well, and then introduce what works well in the future of policy making and the formulation of policies. And then last but not least, I already mentioned comprehensive approaches. And it's important, of course, not only to provide lifelong learning opportunities, but also some social protection measures, so that people who transfer from job to job and they would like to retrain, they have some level of sustained income, and they have this comfort of going through training without putting at risk their household and the income of the household. This is important. And also for the just transition measures, it's important also to rely on active labor market policies with some targeted approaches to vulnerable, disadvantaged groups, low-skilled, and women already mentioned today. This is also super important. But one thing, everybody speaks about lifelong learning as a new concept. It's not new. It's been around for several decades already, and it still doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? I think this is something maybe everybody can reflect about. And I think it doesn't work because we don't have enough operational guidelines. What does make a lifelong learning system a system? So what will be the financial mechanisms that would provide motivation to learn for individuals, but also would allow every party, private sector, government, and individuals to benefit from that and also to contribute to that system in terms of shared responsibility of financing. What will be the incentives? What should be the institutions? What should be the decision-making behind it? We can't just put the lifelong learning weight on the shoulders of individuals alone. That will not work, especially now in the situation when we know that we have more and more workers in the platform economy. They're not covered by the regular employment contract. There is no obligation of an employer to provide training to such workers. So they should not be left behind. Everybody should be somehow included in order to reap the benefits of the green transition. If there will be jobs created, and we know there will be many jobs created, the employment change will be positive, but we have to think about these mechanisms to make lifelong learning system function for all. Thank you.
Gabriela, Stefan, what do you think? Why is lifelong learning not working?
Gabriela?
No, go ahead, Stefan.
I think I would build up on what Olga said. I think what always works is if there is not only a commitment, but also a forcing factor. But I think the forcing factor should come from all parties. If you look to studies done by the European Commission on the motivation to do lifelong learning, if I now put myself into the shoes of a skilled or non-skilled person, we see that only probably 23% of skilled people are actively going and try and do lifelong learning. If you go to non-skilled, it's almost, I think it's 8.7% that come and say, I want to do something. And I think here we need to almost require a lifelong learning from companies, for individuals, and from governments and institutions to really nurture that lifelong learning. Otherwise, I fully agree, there will be a huge part of workers that we risk to leave behind, aside of technology that is instrumental to have access to knowledge. Gabriela.
Yeah, I was going to add something that I consider to be key regarding lifelong learning, which is that 99% of the business world are SMEs. And from my point of view, to reach SMEs through, to make them come into education is super tough. Because for employers, to of course the cost of training, but also to lack of these human resources while they are in training is something, and so we really need to take into account the business world of the SMEs also, you know. But anyways, I wanted to add something about what Olga and Stefan said regarding the pandemic, no? the need to adapt education programs to the pandemic. And I would like to share our own experience with our different programs. We have a WBCSD education programs, of course, all related to sustainability. But it was important that two of our programs, one is LEAP, the one I talked about before, more than training programs, they are experiences. And of course, with the rest, we adapted. And with these concrete programs I'm talking about, leadership and lead program, we adapted as well. We changed one of the models to virtual. And let me say that it worked quite good because we did it synchronous, you know, live. It was like being in the classroom with the 30 participants, but you miss, you know, like the shine in the eyes. Like when I'm talking about LEAP, if I was there in the scenario together with you, I could transmit the shine in my eyes that you cannot really see it now, no? So it's quite tough, but of course, there are positive points from the pandemic or the virtual education that it's driven to, no? Which is that you reach more people, no? for people that maybe people from Colombia and people from Singapore couldn't join together because traveling and that's really a point, I think, a positive point.
Thank you, Gabriela. I'd like to hand over a question I received during our event app, our Huva app. And there is a question, what would be the importance of training visual intelligence and improved literacy levels to ensure reskilling and upskilling of workers towards a better future? Tough question. Who wants to answer it? Nobody. Tough question. Should we skip it?
No, I think it's one of the preconditions to do what we just discussed, the lifelong learning, and what we have done during the pandemic is for free Fridays, which needs access. I totally agree with Olga. So we're always talking only for part of the population who has access, but free courses as knowledge is accessible. I think that's one of the solutions and one of the pre-requirements to do lifelong learning.
Thank you, Gabriela. What should companies do in order to have more women in senior positions? This is the next question I received.
Okay, well, let me tell you that I took off my jacket just to fake that it's warm weather here in Spain. But if you could see through the window, it's raining so bad as if we were in Switzerland. So I guess we are adapting to the scenario. But at home it's warm. Anyways,
you look great.
Well,
doesn't matter.
Well, I would put the answer the other way. You know, the companies that are having the best practices within gender equality issues are those who consider talent, merit, and personal capacity of individuals, leaving aside gender, right? Those companies have a plan. Those companies set goals. For instance, work-life balance measures, not only for women, but also for men, to encourage their involvement, of course. There are companies that try to reach equal representation at their governing bodies. But above all the measures or initiatives that I could say, I believe that they should really believe in it. These companies don't need to just take a picture of 5 women and 5 men because it's just a passing fad that they must join, no? They should really believe that gender equality adds value to their business.
Thanks, Gabriela. Stefan, one more question. How does Adecco Group integrate UN sustainability goals as a company via their people and staff, because the employees are also green ambassadors? Not an easy question, but...
We have taken the five goals and integrated it in our sustainability initiatives and measures. As I said earlier on, I think it's probably a combination these days of realizing that sustainability is not only a sustainable way to do business, but it's also a competitive advantage. It attracts talents. That's why our CEO has set out not only carbon goals, HQ without waste, and but also on the diversity factor to say we want to have diverse teams in order to be competitive in the market, and again to attract talent, because we will see companies more and more smaller or bigger companies. We need to be attractive for talents. And I think that's the best way to have diverse and then to hardwire it into all your initiatives, be it the sustainability goals, and report back into the organization. I think that's what I would add to what Gabriela said. I would set clear goals, have the belief from the top to the bottom, but also hardwire and measure it, and then show best practices. I have 2 daughters. I think what's missing are role models, that you have good role models that the young generation can look at and say, I want to do what this woman or this man is doing. I think that's important too.
Thank you so much. Gabriela, we got a comment. We love Gabriela for her hard work for women equality. Please continue. So that's what I'd like
Thank you very much.
to hand over to you. Yeah, we're at the end of our panel talk. Thanks so much for the insights, for sharing your thoughts, your experiences with us. Thanks also to our viewers and our guests for being interactive, sending some questions to us. Hopefully see you next time at Future Talk all together in one event location. That would be great. Stay healthy, stay safe. Thanks so much for being part of Future Talk 2020. And goodbye from Switzerland, from Bern. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Healthy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are in Bern, the wonderful and beautiful capital of Switzerland. Right now, we stream to the whole world, just to Spain, to Korea, and so on. And we are very delighted to have the mayor, Mr. Graffenried, with us today. And he will share with us his views of smart cities and the meaning of greening cities. I want to welcome the mayor of Bern, Alec von Graffenried. This is your stage. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you very much for this warm welcoming. Welcome to Bern, wherever you are. Welcome to Future Talk. I heard it rained in Spain. We have bright weather here in Bern. I just come from a swimming in the river in my lunch break, so I hope you will be able to come to Bern soon and to take advantage of the possibilities of our city very soon. I am pleased not to see you, but I hope you are there somewhere, wherever you are, and you're willing to change the way we think about the future and change the role of smart cities. So I welcome you, all experts, wherever you are online. So I was invited to talk about lifelong learning and the effort to become a smart city, a smart capital city, and the city of Bern, of course, is trying to become more and more smart and a more and more smart city. So how do these two issues match with each other to become a smart strategy, our climate strategy and the smart city strategy? So let's first focus on the topic of smart cities. I'm convinced that a smart, innovation-friendly city will only be successful if it generates added value for its citizens, for its people. This means that all people living and working in a smart city should benefit from it, even if they don't notice it. The goal must be that new technologies make the daily life easier. For example, I myself, I just learned a couple of months ago how to pay my bills with my mobile phone. It's so quickly done, it's so easy, so I just love it. And that's how innovation should be achieved. So Bern, for instance, is introducing a new platform for multimodal transport. It's called umove.ch. CH is for Switzerland. With one app, you get access to the bike renting system, car sharing system, and public transportation system. So it's no need to have any longer separate apps for every means of transport, and with just one click, you can organize your trip with any transport mean you'd like to, or the app tells you to use because it's the best use of transport. So traveling around will get a lot easier, well, at least once the pandemic is over. The key word is convenience. Smart solutions have to be smart, of course, and they have to be convenient. In Swiss German, we call it gäbig. They have to be gäbig. Gäbig is everything that is gäbig. Everybody likes things that are gäbig. In German, it would be praktisch. So this is convenience. Nudging strategies may help to get people to consume green energy. If solar energy is the default option, individuals hesitate to contact their energy provider to switch to other options, and as studies show. Little by little, we can make the world better, greener, and smarter. So, how strong is our ability to change? This depends on the issue and, of course, on the grade of emotional involvement. As a mayor, I've met a lot of youngsters here in Bern with high involvement who fight for climate change. It's all over Europe. We know the youth for climate change. I, of course, as I'm a member of the Green Party, I understand very well their urgency to act now. And Bern has a long tradition for promoting sustainable development. And in the age of digitalization, now we have new instruments to achieve these goals. We can measure better, we have a lot of little sensors, and we can share live data immediately. For instance, Switzerland invented something like the 2000 watt society. What is the 2000 watt society? 2000 watt is for 24 hours, 365 days a year. A society uses 2000 watt a person. This is a sustainable use, energy use. This is the energy use that all over the world has been used in the year of 2000. And we had to get back to the energy use of the year of 2000. And the 2000 watt society all over the world shows us how we can achieve that. 2000 watt would be 1 ton of CO2 carbon consumption. And this is divided down to the individual. So the individual can understand how energy consumption can be reduced to a sustainable level. And I think this is very pedagogical and a very, very clever way to show people how they can change their energy consumption. Because if you talk of terawatts, who knows what a terawatt is and how many O's you have to add to get to terabillion. So everybody of us has the potential to adapt to the new reality as we learn. The virus, of course, changed our life and our behavior in a few months. And I think we learned so much about pandemics, viruses, and I think these learnings all over the world are so impressive that we should make a learning ourselves. How can we bring all those informations, this huge amount of information in a short amount of time to the whole population of the world? And now you can go to Australia or South America or Asia, you can talk about virus, epidemiology, pandemic, and everybody will understand, and everybody will explain you infection rates and the way viruses are spread over the world, and everybody learned so much about a pandemic, and I think this should be a great pattern how we could learn about, for instance, climate change or, for instance, other challenges we face in our world. I'm convinced that the smart city has the potential to influence the way we live and we learn in the future, and we have to use this opportunity wisely. Otherwise, smart cities will be nothing else than just another label. It's therefore necessary to identify where the greatest potential of real sustainable development lies for our society and for our future. We all have to understand why we have to act now and why we have to act together. So let's discover where our future strengths and talents are. Personally, I'm dreaming of a digital society combined with achievements like sustainable development, combined to our democratic system and, of course, the rule of law. We therefore call Bern a city of participation, and we also try to live this pattern of a city of participation. We try to involve everybody in order to bring them to more self-responsibility. And I'm convinced myself that we have to include everybody to become even stronger. So the most important task for this is to leave no one behind. Until today, in innovation, we often faced parallel solutions. So we always had in parallel an analog solution, the old analog solution, and then we had aside new digital solution to leave no one behind. And I think we should change that pattern, and we are about to change it here in Bern. We have to go to single digital solutions, but we also have to give access to everybody to these solutions. So, for instance, the example of digital payments with a mobile phone, we now have offices in each neighborhood. These can be neighborhood offices or post offices or offices in homes for elderly people, where there is assistance. So we have a terminal and we invite people to do their payments digitally on those terminals, but they are assisted. And maybe they get curious and they will like the easiness of paying digitally, and more maybe even we can get them to have their own mobile phone and in a certain time to make their payments, digital payments themselves. So I think we should go away from dual parallel systems just to digital systems and to assist people to use the digital system or digital solution. Innovation is very important to me, to a city, to get forward, and a smart city gets as smart as its people. So we need creativity and a dialogue to bring in new, bright solutions. That's why we created the Digital Days. We just had the Digital Days here in Bern in the beginning of the week. A festival of smart solutions, of learning labs and innovative talks, and we had a great participation of our citizens in our Digital Days festival. To sum up, I'm very optimistic concerning the role of smart cities for a sustainable development and fostering innovation. I'd like to thank the World TEDx Association for organizing this conference here in Bern, even if you're not here, but you saved a lot of fossil fuels by staying home. Thank you for that. And in our hybrid world, it's very important to connect like-minded people to discuss the potential of smart cities, of disrupting technologies, of hypes and hopes. Let's see where this discussion will lead us. I'm very optimistic. Thanks for your attention, and I wish you a nice evening. Thank you.
Thanks so much to the Mayor of Bern, Alec von Grafenried, for being here today, for sharing your thoughts with us. Thanks for being part of Future Talk 2020. Thank you so much. I'd now like to give the floor to the Vice President of the World TEDx Association for some closing remarks and some takeaways. Nader Imani, there he is.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor von Grafenried, dear participants, what a rich afternoon in terms of experience sharing and speakers that they have been giving us the ideas about how we can make our world more green, more resilient. I think the greening of existing occupations should be on the agenda of education policymakers and educators in our education systems. To be considered in terms of upskilling, reskilling, I mean, this wording has been quite a couple of times mentioned by many of our participants and speakers this afternoon. But also of education reforms, the requirements for education to go through these reforms to make the education more resilient and also answering to a resilient world. And greening areas such as renewable energies, energy and resource efficiency, and natural resource management. Green jobs, green skills, competencies, learning objectives, curriculum will be defined and sustained by innovative learning solutions. So to do support all that, we will need probably talents, quite a good of numbers of that, talents with necessary foundation in terms of knowledge, in terms of attitude, but also values. Education reforms on TVET for green and sustainable economies will have its maximum impact for success if, but only if, the gaining attitude and values are further resulted respectively from secondary and primary education, the foundation. Greening economy shall be reflected throughout the entire education system, quite holistically. The call for greening skills, green economy for less, if not no impact on climate change, are about managing expectations. Expectations that could be generational, which we must also have to address to. I would like to take a certain number of codes that have been really mentioning through the afternoon. Mrs. Kirchenknopf, representing the government states of Switzerland, that has been giving us the examples of growing the building sectors, the construction sectors, by establishing a green certifications. Mr. Kohn from the Korean embassy showing us how education could be transformational to really bring one society to the new society, as it has been the example of the Korean case. But also to make this society more responsible, also more resilient. Mrs. Choi, that has been asking a call for action to really turn the world to growth, but also with regard to transformations and innovation, using TVET as an example. Mr. Avikan, representing the private sector, that has been really benchmarking the private sector as Hilti, one of the major global leaders around the globe, that's searching for alternatives for resources, for raw materials, to ensure sustainability and profitability of the company. But not only this, it has been also mentioned later on, how to be a world-class employer's brand for a new generation, to be just simply more attractive for talents. In the panel one, it has been mentioned by Mr. Hart, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I like it. Triple R, very simple. How TVET could really help to develop locally qualified human resources for further investments, also in the green economy. It has been also mentioned by Mr. Arini that engagement from the private sector, very much important, that the local solutions could be part of the real solutions, just listening to the local voice. Mrs. Mani, that needs for multi-stakeholders and partnerships, that is really also important to have a dialogue as an inclusive one, inclusive dialogue. Mr. Ruan from Nestle, Mrs. Moran from Nestle, that has been really also mentioning the meeting customer needs all around the globe to have zero emissions and zero waste. In the panel two, we have been listening to quite extensive informations and experience sharing. Mr. Howick, that was really talking about need for social contact, to establish a lifelong learning, and that shift building bridges to the future, leaving no one behind. It has been also mentioned again. Mrs. Strietska Ilina from ILO, talking about transition to circular economy, such an important nowadays statements for our economy of tomorrow, to many jobs that are really disappearing because of the fossil and the brown economy, but also at the same time that the green economy has the power to create even more jobs that are really disappearing. But the instrument or the catalyst for that would be probably TVET or education as a whole. Also the need for the private engagement in terms of PPP or public-private partnership. And last but not least, Mrs. Uriati, that has been talking about women that for more productivity, more competitiveness, more sustainability in terms of achievement of SDGs, but also a positive side of the pandemic that she has been mentioning that, well, pandemic is also forcing us to change and to think differently because of that change. Well, to face our future, let's keep the window of opportunity wide open. Innovative technologies such as core elements of Industry 4.0 or circular economy will offer more to reach in production, management, and conversion of energy storage and distribution, as well as its intelligent usage. While our natural resources will be managed with smart processes to secure decent life for all, leaving no one behind. Just to change our blue planet every day, every time greener. We invite the world of policymakers, business, and education to act greener for our future. Thank you for your participation and interest. Over back to you, Doro.
Thank you, Nader, for the closing words. Thank you very much. Yes, dear viewers, ladies and gentlemen, dear excellencies, we're at the end of the second day of Future Talk 2020, live from Bern. Thank you very much for joining our event virtually or live on site here in our event location. Hopefully you enjoyed the day. In my opinion, we had a great day. We had 2 interesting panels, the private sector talk, and so many insights in the green education field. And you all know the phrase, all good things are 3. One more day to go. Tomorrow we will focus on artificial intelligence. For sure, we also have interesting persons joining us via Zoom or here live in Bern. We will have speakers, we will have panelists. We also will have the private sector talk with Mr. Stotz from Festo Didactics. So hope to see you tomorrow. Stay tuned, until our last day at Future Talk here in Bern. Bye-bye and have a good evening. Bye.